nationally as early as 1900, while most of northern China didn't even begin experimenting with the general process until the disasters of the Great Leap Forward of 1958 to 62. The result in population growth was similarly uneven. Some of the coastal regions experienced the boom far earlier than others. Overall, between 1950 and 1970, China's population expanded from 540 million to 810 million-ish. Countering that, the Great Leap Forward generated one of humanity's greatest man-made famines, resulting in between 15 million and 55 million deaths, depending on who is writing the history. So was China fully unindustrialized when Nixon visited? No. China at that time was already responsible for 5% of global carbon emissions. But China is still huge, so even those emissions came from a very small percentage of the population living in the most advanced coastal and southern cities. What many in the world see as a threat, the rapid rise of China in economic, military, and demographic terms, is nothing more than 200 years of economic and demographic transformation squeezed into a searing 4 decades, utterly transforming Chinese society and global patterns of trade, as well as the Chinese demography. No matter how you crunch the numbers, China in 2022 is the fastest aging society in human history. In China, the population growth story is over, and has been over since China's birth rate slipped below replacement levels in the 1990s. A full replacement birth rate is 2.1 children per woman. As of early 2022, China's only partly released 2011 to 2020 census indicates China's rate is at most 1.3, among the lowest of any people throughout human history. The country's demographic contraction is now occurring just as quickly as its expansion, with complete demographic collapse certain to occur within a single generation. China is amazing, just not for the reasons most opine. The country will soon have traveled from pre-industrial levels of wealth and health to post-industrial demographic collapse in a single human lifetime, with a few years to spare. Nor will China die alone. The time-staggered nature of the industrialization process, from Britain to Germany to Russia and northwestern Europe and Japan to Korea to Canada and Spain, means that much of the world's population faces mass retirements, followed by population crashes at roughly the same time. The world's demographic structure passed the point of no return 20 to 40 years ago. The 2020s are the decade when it all breaks apart. For countries as varied as China, Russia, Japan, Germany, Italy, South Korea, Ukraine, Canada, Malaysia, Taiwan, Romania, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Austria, the question isn't when these countries will age into demographic obsolescence. All will see their worker cadres pass into mass retirement in the 2020s. None have sufficient young people to even pretend to regenerate their populations. All suffer from terminal demographics. The real questions are how and how soon do their societies crack apart? And do they deflate in silence or lash out against the dying of the light? Coming up behind them rapidly is another cadre of countries whose birth rates have dropped even faster, and so who will face a similar demographic disintegration in the 2030s and 2040s. Brazil, Spain, Thailand, Poland, Australia, Cuba, Greece, Portugal, Hungary, and Switzerland. Even further forward, in the 2050s, are countries who started their birth rate collapse a bit later, and so who may have a chance to avoid demographic dissolution if they can get today's 20 and 30-somethings to have a whole mess of kids. But honestly, these late arrivals' birth rate collapses have been so severe it doesn't look great. Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Vietnam, Iran, Turkey, Morocco, Uzbekistan, Saudi Arabia, Chile, the Czech Republic. The next batch of countries, mostly in the poorer parts of Latin America or Sub-Saharan Africa or the Middle East, are even more concerning. Their demographic structures are younger, far younger, but that doesn't mean they are in a better position, because there is more to economic and demographic health than just numbers and ages. In most cases, these countries are extractive economies that ship out this or that raw commodity, using the proceeds to supply their population with imported food and/or consumer goods. In many ways, they've managed to access portions of the industrialization process, most notably lower mortality, more reliable food supplies, increased urbanization, and population booms, without experiencing the bits that make advancement stick: increased educational levels, a modernized state, a value-added economic system, social progress, industrial development, or technological achievement. In a safe, globalized world, such a hybridization model can limp along so long as the commodities flow out and the money flows in. But in an unsafe, fractured world where trade is sharply circumscribed, outright national collapse will by far not be the biggest problem these peoples face. In these countries, the very population is vulnerable to changes farther abroad. The industrial technologies that reduce mortality and raise standards of living cannot be uninvented, but if trade collapses, these technologies can be denied. Should anything impact these countries' commodity outflows or the income or product inflows, the entire place will break down while experiencing deep-rooted famine on a biblical scale. Economic development, quality of life, longevity, health, and demographic expansion are all subject to the whims of globalization, or rather, in this case, de-globalization.